I would sooner accept the penalties, kill a man than a hawk, says the American poet Robinson Jeffers. I'm Dr. Jackson Crawford, an Old Norse specialist teaching at the University of Colorado Boulder, previously at UC Berkeley and UCLA. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of birds of prey, hawks, eagles, and falcons in Norse mythology. While ravens get a justified majority of the attention as birds in Norse mythology because of the god Odin's two ravens, Hugin and Munin, birds of prey are not much less important. The Norse raider probably sort of sees himself in predatory animals, ravens, hawks, eagles, wolves. These animals are mentioned so often in the poetry of the Viking Age as the recipients of the dead in a battle. Battle is often phrased as feeding or slaking the thirst of or slaking the hunger of or setting a table for hawks or ravens or wolves or eagles. And the raider probably sees this as as an almost brotherly connection with these animals. They also profit on the bad days of others. But in the mythology, there are specific examples of hawks, eagles, and falcons coming up, often as alternative forms for gods or their enemies, the giants or Jotnar. So, for example, the god Odin takes the form of an eagle when he is fleeing from the home of Gunnlod, daughter of Suttungr, after he has stolen the mead of poetry, Otherdir, from her. I've talked about that in a separate video. And often Loki will take the form of a falcon by donning the falcon skin that the goddess Freyja owns. He goes in this falcon skin to Jotunheimr, the world of giants, in Thrymskvida, in order to find out what's happened to Thor's hammer when it's missing. And he also uses this to go to Jotunheimr in a story in the Prose Edda when he goes to the giant Geirrodr. I've also talked about those incidents in previous videos. One of the most interesting examples of Loki taking his falcon form is also an example of one of the giants, or Jotnar, taking an eagle form. This story, which is told in the Prose Edda also, involves Odin, Loki, and the mysterious figure known as Hunir wandering in the wilds one day, and they come across a herd of cattle. They kill a steer, and they begin to cook it, but the meat won't cook over their fire. They wonder why this might be, and they happen to look up into a tree and see an eagle sitting there, and they wonder if maybe the eagle is the reason why their meat won't cook. They ask the eagle if it's the reason, and the eagle says, "Yes, I am." And the eagle is Thjatsi. The eagle, Thjatsi, says, "I will let the meat cook if you'll let me have my fill of it." The gods say, "Fine." The meat begins to cook, but then the eagle swallows down huge chunks of it. This aggravates Loki, so Loki swings a stick at it, but the stick sticks to Thjatsi, and the eagle flies up into the sky with Loki dragged behind, attached to him. Loki, of course, begs to be let down in a somewhat cartoonish moment, but Thjatsi says that he will only let Loki down on the condition that Loki will bring Idun out of the walls of Osgardr, where she is protected by the other gods. Now, Idun is the goddess who maintains the apples that the gods eat in order to stay young, have everlasting youth. So Loki goes back to Osgardr, having agreed to this, and finds Idun, and he lures her outside the walls of Osgardr by saying he has some nice apples to show her. The magnificent, clever, plotting Loki that we often want him to be in modern retellings of these myths is sometimes a much simpler trickster in the actual Old Norse stories. While having let her outside, Thjatsi comes in eagle form and picks her up and takes her away to Jotunheimr, but of course the gods begin to get old and gray, and they're furious at Loki for having helped with this, so they demand that Loki go and get her back. Loki borrows Freyja's falcon skin, turns into a falcon, and flies over to Jotunheimr, where Thjatsi is out fishing. And he happens to see Idun inside of his hut, so he goes down to Idun, turns her into a nut so that he can carry her in his falcon claws, and then he flies away. And as he's flying, Thjazi notices him flying away with his prize, and Thjazi comes after him in eagle form. But Loki manages to cross over the walls to Osgarður unharmed. But when Thjazi comes over the walls of Osgarður, the gods light the flames that they've built, that light a pyre they've built up on their side of it, and the flames scorch the eagle Thjazi and bring him crashing down to the earth dead. This is the reason, of course, that Skadi, Thjazi's daughter, is going to come to Jotunheimr now and demand that the gods pay her back by marrying one of them to her, and this is how she winds up married to Njordr. I have discussed that, I believe, elsewhere. If I haven't, I should make a whole video about Skadi. But Skadi, of course, having been a Jotun, daughter of the Jotun man, Thjazi, becomes considered a goddess once she's married to a god, married to Njordr. So the gods and their enemies often take the form of birds of prey, but there are also important birds of prey on Midgarður, the world of human beings. One of the most notable is Hobrok, which means high pants, kind of like Lothbrok means shaggy pants. This is probably a reference to the fact that if you look at some hawks, they have leg feathers that come kind of higher or lower, and they can look like they have tall pants, sort of like high cut-off pants on. I think it's kind of a fun name for a bird. And Hobrok belongs to the saga hero Hrolf Kraki. And Hrolf Kraki is a king of Denmark, and when he goes to fight his great enemy Adils, the Swedish king, he and his men, of course, fight the Swedes, but Hobrok also fights the hawks and falcons that belong to the Swedes, because, of course, falconry was a big deal back in the day. And so during his battle, Hrolf Kraki is, cutting through Swedes, and his hawk comes down and lands on his shoulder, and he looks at him as Hobrok is grooming himself, and he says, "Well, it looks like you've worked pretty hard today, too." And, of course, it turns out that he slaughtered all of the hawks and falcons in the hawk tower, the falcon tower of the Swedish king. And of course, Hobrok gets a nice little shout out in one of the poems of the Poetic Edda, Grimnismal, where Odin calls him the best of hawks, just as Sleipnir, Odin's horse, is the best of horses. Throughout the poetic corpus of Old Norse, you'll also find, as I believe I mentioned, hundreds of mentions of hawks, ravens, eagles, falcons, mostly in the form of something that is fed by the warrior. But curiously, you can't always be sure that just because you see the word hawk that it is a hawk that's mentioned, because often in poetic kennings in Old Norse, the name of any bird can be used for any other bird, just as long as there is some kind of modifier word that tells you what bird is really meant. So a raven might be the blue hawk, because ravens are stereotypically blue in Old Norse poetry, and just that word blue tells you what bird is really meant. So you can also find, of course, eagles called things like wound cranes, because they are the bird that might eat of wounds. But then a wound crane might also be a raven. You have to sometimes judge this by context. But they pay quite a bit of attention to these. There is also the hawk that sits either on top of Yggdrasil or at the edge of the world and makes the winds. He is called different things in different sources. He's either called Veðurfolnir, which is literally something like the weather worsener, or he is called Hræsvelgur, the swallower of raw flesh. That is said in Grimnismal, I think, it might be Vathutnismal, to be the hawk that sits at the edge of the world and makes the winds. All of these sources that I've mentioned here are available in modern English translations by me, or will be available shortly. I translated the Poetic Edda in 2015. My next project is the saga of Hrolf Kraki, which includes, of course, Hobrok, and then I'll be translating the Prose Edda after that. So I hope that you'll watch for those. And for now, from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.